Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. From websites and online stores, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence. Hello friends, I hope that you've been well. As you can guess from the title, I am going to be recreating a drawing that I did from back in 2007. So I was initially torn between these two pieces, so I made a poll on Instagram, and this one on the right ended up being the winner. And for those of you who don't know, this is Misa, a character from the series Death Note. And so this character is quite playful. She has a very bubbly personality. And so with my new version, I wanted to try and let that personality shine a little bit more in the pose that I chose for her, but I also still wanted originally to keep it somewhat close to the pose that I had originally. So I was going for a standing pose with like the hand on the hip, and it was, kind of cut off at the mid thigh there. And I made the mistake of not doing any like figure drawing warm-ups. I hadn't really drawn a figure in quite a while, so I was really struggling with figuring out the posing, and I just felt really rusty because I think lately I've just been doing a lot of portraits. So originally I was looking at a bunch of different K-pop girls for posing because that's just sort of the vibe and the energy that I get from this character, but those were just not landing for me. And so eventually I went and looked at the Graffiti Studio pack of their pinup reference photos, and I ended up landing with this photo that I used to reference most of the body here. The arm that's kind of out with the peace sign, actually I referenced myself in the mirror to make that gesture. So yeah, I highly recommend checking out Graffiti Studios. They have incredible photo packs that are specifically made for references for artists. They have lots of different figures, they have lots of different models, lots of different themes. Some are nude, some are costume. They even have like landscape and scenery type photos as well. So I'll have the link in the description if you're interested. But before we continue, I'd like to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. As a creative who is always looking to evolve and adapt to new things, Squarespace is such a great platform in the fact that it is so flexible. You can have a portfolio, an online shop, a blog, you name it, and they have a template ready to go, and it's going to be beautiful. As a video creator, I really appreciate being able to have my YouTube videos directly on my website alongside a gallery, and it is already ready to go in terms of being able to adapt to multiple different views for a phone, a tablet, you name it. And I really appreciate that because I don't want to learn how to code. And so it allows me to focus on actually making artwork and less about making a coded website. So if you also want a website that is really intuitive and easy to use, head over to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/imawonder for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So after I was finished with the sketch, I printed it out on just regular printer paper, and then I had transferred the sketch onto the paper here using my light pad. In this case, I am using my Ohuhu marker sketchbook that I've been using quite a lot lately for my alcohol marker and colored pencil drawings. And so with the original drawing from 2007, I believe it was just fine liners and colored pencils. And so my typical illustrations these days when I'm using dry media, aka like not watercolors or gouache or something that's actually paint, I typically go for alcohol markers, fine liners, and colored pencils. And so even though the original one did not contain alcohol markers, maybe people consider this cheating, but I decided to use them this round for the new one because that's just more true to the process that I do with my work now. And I will say, like, at that time in high school, especially coming from, a place where I was obviously very, very much influenced by anime and manga, I so badly wanted access to Copic markers because that was the standard. That was what was pretty much the only thing on the market in terms of alcohol markers that I was aware of. And they were and are quite pricey, and especially for someone who was in high school who did not have a ton of disposable income, I couldn't afford them. So I just made do with using colored pencils and fine liners. And so I think that now doing this recreation, I think not only obviously have I done a lot of illustrations and have a lot of experience now, and would like to think that I have leveled up my skills as well, but I'm also using the mediums that I would have wanted to use when I was in high school. So anyway, I probably am exhausting this style at this point, but I still really love it and have fun with it. And the style that I'm talking about is this two-tone kind of highlighting, or the two light sources. So I've been doing this a lot in my marker illustrations lately, and I can't get enough. I just think it's really fun and creates a lot of dynamic interest in illustration. So as you can see, I have the light pink coming from the left and this blue coming from the right, which of course was not in the original illustration. But again, I didn't want to limit myself in any way trying to be an exact recreation of the original drawing. I really wanted to show how far I've come and what my actual illustration looks like nowadays in comparison to the original, and obviously just take inspiration from it. For those of you who are familiar with my markers process, you know that I don't often do a ton of blending, but I really wanted to try and get the effect of a transparent legging or thigh-high sock here. So you can see I have two different gray markers that I have in my hand that I'm swapping between really quickly to try and get them to blend when I place them next to each other really quickly. And I'm just sort of going in layers with the two of them. It wasn't perfectly successful. It's not like a seamless blend, but I think that knowing I was going to use colored pencils on top, it was good to have the two values as a foundation to begin with, at the very least, even if it was a little bit streaky. And then here for the plaid pattern on the skirt, I was able to use a dark gray to layer on top of the red. And you can see as I layer the horizontal stripe through the gray, it sort of creates this like intersection with the vertical stripes, and it creates that plaid pattern. And when I add in the color pencil lines later, it all comes together and it's very satisfying. And yeah, I, obviously was changing the outfit a little bit from the previous one, but I wanted to still take nods from the original. So I changed the type of skirt that she's wearing, but I did keep it plaid, kept the chain with the belt and then the thigh-high socks. And then, of course, a lot of cleavage in the top. So there's still lots of nods to the original version, but just in an elevated way. For those of you who are familiar with this character, you'll know that Misa has a very gothic kind of punk Lolita style, which I absolutely love. Her fashion is so good, and I used to love it at the time, and then now with my current taste in style, and I think the Y2K, resurgence as well, a lot of it has come full circle. I was looking at all the different images of her, and a lot of the fashion completely checks out for what people are wearing and what I like today. So it's kind of amazing to see fashion just kind of make that full circle moment. But yeah, the character pretty much never wears this like brown and pink combination that I had in the original version here. I think that color combo was indicative of what I was into at the time, mixed in with the punk gothic style that she has in the series. So I forwent the brown and pink and opted for red, black, and gray, which personally fits my style better and also actually suits the character more, because that is a color combination that she's in most of the time. And I recently got this really cool corset top thing from Disturbia, and so that was actually inspiration for the corset top that I gave her in my new version. And as well, I wanted to update the background here. I didn't want to go for a full scenery or anything like that because that felt a little bit too far away from what I was doing with the 2007 version, but I didn't really love the plaid pattern that I had in that version. So for my new one, I decided to kind of opt for almost like it was a magazine cover because, like I was mentioning earlier, Misa, the character, she is a celebrity in the series. She has an acting career, and I believe she's also a singer as well. So she has reasons to be on a magazine cover. So it all checks out. And yeah, for the star and the font, I actually, when I finished the initial sketch on Procreate on my iPad, I brought the sketch into Photoshop on my computer and I just used the polygon tool to make the starburst shapes and then typed out using a font that I had for the text. That way it was just a little bit cleaner because I knew I had to trace it by hand anyway. So there is still that very handmade imperfectness to it because I had to retrace it by hand, but I figured I would give myself a head start by just using Photoshop for the initial phase of them. I initially thought I was going to try and make my own font, but I figured I might as well just make my life a little easier and use an actual computerized font because it's just a little easier. Anyway, at this point, you can see I am now using the colored pencils, which I find really help just give a little bit of life to the piece because I like the subtle texture that the colored pencils give to the alcohol markers. And also it allows me to really dig into a wider variety of colors. So you can see that I'm using purples for the shadows on her skin. And then, of course, I'm also using lots of pinks and peaches to warm up her skin and also kind of smooth out any of the imperfect streaks that I had from the markers. And what I really love as well about using color pencils on top of alcohol markers is you can sometimes lighten certain areas that you think that you might have gone too dark in, or you can of course change the hue slightly as well. So you can see here I'm adding in a peach color again onto the highlight where the leggings are, where I wanted it to look transparent, and then the black and the purple on the edges there to give it more dimension. And I think being able to layer that peach onto that highlight helps give the illusion that her skin tone is sort of peeking through and create the translucency effect on the leggings. And there are also areas in the illustration as well where I use a light like neon pink, and then I also use that light blue as well to help blend and give the glowing kind of bright neon lights effect as well onto the subject. And another thing that I also really enjoy about colored pencils is, yeah, sometimes you can like lighten areas as well. So I end up using a lighter tone on some of her thigh there, and then I also use the pink on part of the kind of bust on the corset as well, because the thing with alcohol markers is you can technically use a lighter marker on a darker area, but I find that it does create more unpredictable results in terms of the lighting effect. So I find I prefer to use colored pencils to lighten an area as opposed to doing the lighter alcohol marker on top of a darker area. And so since we are doing a recreation of an illustration that he did back in 2007, I think it's pretty fitting to discuss a little bit about my art journey from then until now. And I will say, if you are interested in seeing more of my old artwork, I actually did a video a little while back where I reacted to a bunch of my old artwork and sketchbooks from that time. The dates that the artwork was in that video, I think it started in 2004 2004 or 5 and then went up to like 2009 or something. So it pretty much chronicled my time as a preteen and a high schooler. And you can see all of the various influences and styles that I went through and the journey that I went on in my skill set as well. It's a pretty funny video. There's so many more shirtless, hot anime dudes than I remembered. And it really did remind me of May in Turning Red. And it really made sense as to why when that movie came out, everybody messaged me about it and was like, hey, did you see this movie? This character reminds me of you. So anyway, it's a pretty entertaining video if you haven't seen it yet. Anyway, so as it comes to no surprise, I'm sure, I have always been very, very influenced and inspired by anime and manga. It was pretty much the forefront of my interests in high school. And I have since grown into an adult who still consumes anime and manga. So some things don't really change. But of course, as life goes, I have experienced a lot of other things and I have gained a lot of other interests as well. So not only am I influenced by anime and manga, but I am, of course, very inspired by the music that I listen to and pop culture in general. And I also have taken a really strong interest in makeup and fashion. And I also went to school for graphic design. So there's just more influences and kind of things that I consume that just get, boiled down and distilled into my art style. And it's always going to be changing all the time because my interests and the things that I consume are always going to be changing. And I think that if you are interested in this kind of topic about art influences and inspiration, I actually recently filmed a podcast with Alba, who is an amazing artist, by the way, if you don't already follow her. But she's been starting this podcast series on her YouTube channel called Snacks with Artists. And basically, we have some snacks, we sit down and we talk about art. And the big topic that we discussed in our episode was about art influences. And what was really interesting that we kind of talked about, which I hadn't really thought about, but is how for us, when we were growing up, our resources were so much more limited. And because of that, our kind of influences were really hyper focused, I guess. So, we had to rent movies. We had to borrow books from the library. And so you would only have a handful of things at any given time. And so we would just kind of hyper fixate on those handful of things. And that was very evident in our work, I think, because we didn't have as many influences. Whereas people nowadays, you can pop onto the internet and you have access to an unlimited and infinite amount of things, which I can understand can be kind of overwhelming. But of course, we are creatures of habit. So you're going to gravitate towards certain things. And I really say just lean into the things that you're interested in it. And you don't have to consciously incorporate it into your art style. It will probably just happen naturally. And that is something that I'm really always trying to preach to people is don't try to think about it too much. Just let it come naturally to you. And also don't focus on what you think is going to be popular or what you think is trendy, because it won't feel authentic. It won't feel genuine. And I think that people can tell when the work that you made just didn't really come from the heart. I know it sounds so cheesy, but for me, being creative and being an artist is because there's a joy in it. You do it because you enjoy it. And if you're doing something just because you think it'll be popular or that'll be popular on social media, then what's the point, right? I think I talk about this a lot and I sound like a broken record at this point, but ultimately you want to be having fun. And that's something that I want to continue to remind myself of as well, because if I'm being honest, I haven't really been super satisfied with the work that I've made in the past number of years. And so I'm constantly trying to strike a balance of enjoying the process, but also enjoying the work that I make. So it's going to be a journey. I'm not really sure exactly what that's going to look like. It's one of those things where I make the thing and I'm like, I guess I like it. And then when I look back at the entire year and I'm like, that's the body of work that I made. So I don't know. It's a journey that I'm trying to figure out. But overall, I will say that this exercise was really good for me because it really does show you how far you've come as an artist when you see the comparison side by side. So in any case, I hope that this video was insightful, and let me know your thoughts on the new version or how you feel about the old version. Overall, I think that I have come a long way, and while I'm still not perfectly satisfied with where my art is right now, I am happy with seeing the progress between the two. So anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!